You've found nightfall murmurs. When day fades into silence, the world begins to whisper. Some stories come as murmurs, some as warnings, but they all come at night. Don't be afraid to listen, but never listen alone. A twig's sharp retort fractured the forest hush, arresting our motion mid-stride. Hours we'd trekked, immersed in the profound quietude of the wild, but that singular crack reconfigured everything. As we drew close, 3 figures straining against the encroaching twilight. The serene escape we craved began its terrifying metamorphosis into a struggle for existence, pitted against predators far deadlier than fang or claw. My name is Liam. The wilderness has been my sanctuary for much of my existence. This excursion, deep into a seldom-trod fold of the Appalachians, was undertaken with Maya and Finn, my most steadfast companions. Months of anticipation had culminated in this venture, lured by whispers of untouched landscapes and absolute solitude. We were blind, blissfully so, to the true nature coiled within those ancient woods. Our camp, established in a sun-dappled clearing beside a chattering brook, mirrored some painter's dream of pastoral perfection. 2 halcyon days dissolved in exploration, the simple rituals of fishing, and evenings spent tracing constellations by firelight, laughter echoing amongst the pines. It felt a pocket paradise, claimed solely by us. On the 3rd dawn, ambition spurred us deeper, into realms where the canopy thickened, weaving shadows, and the forest floor grew tangled and secretive. An exhilaration took hold, the potent illusion of being the first souls to tread this ground in generations. Then carried on the breeze, voices, not the congenial calls of fellow wanderers, but something else entirely. Irritation surfaced first. Our private Eden invaded. Yet, drawing nearer, the tone resolved into something harsh, serrated with anger. We sank behind the bulk of a fallen giant, peering through a screen of ferns. The sight constricted my chest, chilling the blood. Within a small, trampled space, several men stood clustered, clad in mismatched camouflage, weapons casually held but undeniably present. A worn map lay unfurled across a crude table, fashioned from logs. "The stash is here, damn it!" one snarled, a grimy finger stabbing the parchment. "We move it tonight. Feds are sniffing too close." Maya's fingers dug into my arm, her eyes vast pools of dawning terror. We had stumbled into a viper's nest. With infinitesimal care, we began our retreat. But the forest floor, littered with nature's tripwires, betrayed us. Finn's boot snagged a hidden root. He floundered, a cascade of snapping branches broadcasting our presence like a klaxon. Heads jerked up, hostile eyes instantly raking the surrounding woods. "Who's out there?" a rough voice bellowed. "Show yourselves!" We bolted. Calculation dissolved, strategy vanished, replaced by the raw electric surge of adrenaline. We thrashed through the undergrowth, branches lashing our faces like whips. Behind us, shouts erupted, the heavy tread of pursuit undeniable. "Split up!" Finn gasped between ragged breaths, the logic brutal but clear. "Harder to track!" A protest died on my lips. He was right. A fleeting, desperate glance passed between us, and then we fractured, plunging into separate green oblivions. Downhill I ran, instinct driving me toward the memory of the stream, water my only hope of erasing my passage. The world became a vertiginous smear of green and brown, my own heartbeat a frantic drum against my ribs. Footfalls pounded somewhere behind, gaining ground. Panic clawed, a cold tide threatening to engulf me, but I fought it back. Focus was survival. I burst from the tree line onto the stream's bank, nearly skidding on slick, moss-covered stones. Without pausing, I plunged into the frigid current, the shock stealing my breath. I pushed downstream, wading, stumbling, striving for speed cloaked in silence. After an eternity compressed into mere minutes, I hauled myself ashore, finding refuge within a shallow overhang, a miniature cavern carved by water and time. I pressed myself into the deepest recess, fighting to quiet the rasp of my breathing. Then, splashing. Someone was moving through the water, methodically searching. I held my breath, every muscle locked, as a silhouette passed the mouth of my hiding place. Close enough to touch, one of the men from the clearing, rifle cradled expectantly. He paused, scanning the shadowed alcove. My heart hammered against my ribs, certain he'd seen, heard, sensed me. But then, with agonizing slowness, he moved on, continuing his downstream hunt. I remained wedged in that confining damp space until my limbs screamed and the shafts of light slanting through the canopy began to soften towards dusk. Only then did I dare to surface. A profound quiet had fallen, the usual chatter of birds and unseen creatures eerily absent. The need to find Maya and Finn was a physical ache, yet ignorance of their fate, or even their direction, was absolute. Night transformed the woods into a phantasmagoria of shifting shadows and imagined threats. Each rustle became a footfall, every silhouette a potential pursuer. I moved like a wraith, senses stretched taut. Hope dwindled with the fading light, until, faint as a sigh, I heard it. A soft, melodic whistle. A simple tune, agreed upon years ago, as our signal should the wilderness ever separate us. My spirit surged. Maya, or Finn. Stealthily, I tracked the sound towards a dense thicket. As I neared, a hand emerged from the tangled branches, beckoning me closer. Maya. She looked ravaged, scratched, smeared with dirt, her face a mask of exhaustion, but breathing, alive. We clung to each other, a silent communion of terror and relief. Finn? I whispered finally, the word catching in my throat. She shook her head, tears welling. I hoped he was with you. That night was a fraught, sleepless vigil within the thorny embrace of the thicket, turns taken at listening, peering into the oppressive dark. Every nocturnal sound jolted us, convinced our fragile sanctuary was breached. Dawn arrived not as a relief, but as a grim imperative. Find Finn, escape this cursed forest. Yet the knowledge that the hunters remained, tireless and lethal, permeated the very air. We moved with excruciating care, seeking any trace of our friend. The woods no longer a place of wonder, but a perilous labyrinth where death could wait behind any trunk. Mid-morning delivered the sound we dreaded, a single gunshot, its sharp crack echoing, sending unseen birds exploding into the sky. Maya and I exchanged a look, the same horrific certainty reflected in each other's eyes. Finn. Caution wrestled with frantic urgency. as we moved towards the sound's origin. Cresting a low rise, we saw them. The clearing below held the armed group, gathered with grim purpose, and kneeling in their midst, head bowed, was Finn. My breath hitched. His face was a canvas of bruises and blood, hands bound tight behind him. The apparent leader loomed over him, pistol held with casual menace. "Last time," the man's voice grated. "Where are the other two?" Finn lifted his head, spat crimson defiance onto the leaf litter. "Go to hell!" The gun rose. Time ran out. Without conscious thought, I seized a heavy stone and flung it with all my strength into the dense woods opposite the clearing. The effect was instantaneous. Heads swiveled towards the unexpected noise. In that split second, Maya and I erupted from cover. I launched myself at the leader, a collision of desperation sending his weapon skittering away. Simultaneously, Maya sprinted towards Finn, knife flashing to sever his bonds. Chaos reigned. I fought with a ferocity born of sheer terror and love for my friends. Finn, though injured, scrambled to his feet and joined the desperate struggle. Amidst the frantic melee, a gap appeared. We seized it, breaking free, running with a speed fueled by primal fear, feet barely seeming to touch the forest floor. Angry shouts pursued us, punctuated by the sporadic crack of gunfire, but we didn't look back, didn't falter. We ran until our lungs burned like acid and our legs threatened to buckle. Gasping, stumbling, we finally collapsed at the edge of something alien and beautiful, weathered asphalt. A road. The simple sight of this mundane ribbon of civilization nearly undid me. We flagged down the first vehicle, appearing no doubt like feral apparitions, torn, bloodied, wild-eyed. The elderly couple inside hesitated, understandably wary, but some raw desperation in our faces must have swayed them. They drove us towards the nearest town, towards the sanctuary of streetlights and sirens. We went straight to the police. The story spilled out, the armed men, the talk of cash, the terrifying chase. Our account, fragmented and breathless, was taken with grave seriousness. State troopers arrived, then federal agents. Over the following days, recovering in the sterile quiet of a local hospital, the full picture emerged. The men were part of a violent extremist cell, entrenched in the region for months. Our accidental intrusion had unraveled their operation, leading to arrests and the dismantling of their network. We were labeled heroes in the news reports, a title that felt hollow, ill-fitting. We were merely three friends who sought adventure and stumbled into a darkness far deeper than any ravine. That trip irrevocably altered us. We had stared into the abyss together, witnessed the predatory capacity lurking beneath the surface of ordinary men. Yet we had also unearthed a resilience within ourselves, a bond forged in terror that proved unbreakable. I still seek solace in the wilderness, still find peace beneath the vast indifference of the trees. But now an awareness accompanies me, a constant understanding that even amidst profound beauty, danger can coil unseen, and I never venture far from the path without recalling the brutal lesson learned that day. Sometimes, the apex predator in the forest walks on two legs. Whispers were the heralds, an indistinct susurrus drifting from the guest chamber at the apex of night, 2 a.m., within a house whose sole occupant was myself. what registered upon my ears in that profound stillness and the ensuing phenomena, I comprehend their veracity. Recounting this requires exactitude, irrespective of the strain on credulity. 6 months prior, the dissolution of my marriage had precipitated my relocation to this weathered Georgian sentinel on Hemlock Lane. 4 bedrooms, twin baths, a structure far too cavernous for a solitary soul adrift. Yet its acquisition was rendered feasible by the recent market's collapse. The guest room remained a void, furnished sparsely with a bed frame, a bureau, and several cartons of Elena's forgotten effects, relics she perpetually delayed retrieving. On that particular Tuesday evening in late autumn, immersed in the flickering glow of televised comedies, the sound manifested, voices emanating from the upper floor. Initially, I dismissed it as electronic chatter, but silencing the television confirmed their autonomous existence. 2 distinct timbre, perhaps 3, engaged in discourse. The specific words swam beneath comprehension, yet the cadence, the rise and fall of human conversation, was unmistakable, filtered through the wall of the guest room. A cold fist clenched around my heart, perspiration beaded on my brow. Motionless upon the sofa, I strained, every nerve taut, attempting to decipher the murmur. It persisted, rhythmic, conversational, yet utterly incongruous within the sealed confines of my dwelling. The familiar weight of the baseball bat, my bedside guardian, felt alien in my trembling grasp. Ascending the staircase, each tread groaned its protest against the silence, the wooden planks amplifying my cautious progress. The voices gained a marginal clarity, though their content remained frustratingly veiled. They possessed a tranquil, almost mundane quality, the sound of individuals conversing normally at an hour profoundly abnormal, within a house secured against intrusion. Darkness reigned in the upstairs corridor. I eschewed the light switches. The source was undeniably the guest room door. Placing my ear flat against the cool wood, I held my breath, desperate for intelligibility. "Cannot sustain this." A male voice, weary, frayed at the edges. "Imperative." A woman, her tone sharp with urgency. "Unjust towards." Another man, perhaps older, his voice deeper. My hand, betraying me with its tremor, reached for the brass knob. Slowly, meticulously, I turned it, striving for silence. It met unyielding resistance. Locked. A jolt went through me. That door was never secured. Its key was a phantom, lost years ago according to the estate agent who brokered the sale. Yet the mechanism refused purchase. I applied more force. Nothing. Solid. Immutable. Simultaneously, the voices within ceased, abruptly. "Hello?" The word fractured as it left my throat. "Who is present?" Only silence answered, profound and absolute. I hammered upon the door. "I hear you. Vacate my property, or the authorities will be summoned." The silence deepened, swallowing my threats. Descending rapidly, I retrieved my mobile, dialing the emergency line. 2 patrol vehicles materialized swiftly, their emergency lights extinguished for stealth. While I waited on the dew-dampened lawn, the officers conducted a thorough sweep. Their findings were null, no breach evident. Every window latched securely from within. The guest room door, when they tested it, yielded without protest. "Are you certain about the voices, sir?" inquired the senior officer, his flashlight beam probing the vacant guest room. "The mind can conjure strange things in the deep hours." I possessed certainty regarding the sounds, certainty regarding the inexplicably locked door. But words failed me. I offered a curt nod, expressing gratitude for their diligence. What alternative existed? They departed. Sleep eluded me that night, and for many subsequent nights. A comprehensive security system, replete with cameras monitoring every portal, was installed. Locks were replaced throughout the house. Yet a chilling intuition persisted. These measures were futile. Precisely 1 week later, at the nadir of 3 a.m., the voices returned. The same indistinct colloquy from the guest chamber. The same impossible lock barring entry. This time, I activated my phone's recorder, holding it aloft. Later, playback yielded only a hiss of empty static. The phenomenon established a pattern, sporadic at first, then accelerating in frequency, always nocturnal, always the trio engaged in seemingly ordinary discourse, forever just beyond the threshold of understanding, always behind the door that possessed no means to lock itself, yet did. My nights migrated to the downstairs sofa, my solace increasingly sought in amber liquids. The prospect of selling loomed, yet the confession it necessitated, who would grant credence to spectral conversations? My own belief wavered on the precipice of sanity. Then came the escalation. A December night brought a new element woven into the vocal tapestry, weeping. A profound, gut-wrenching sorrow emanated from the woman's unseen presence. The male voices intensified, tinged now with an anger. Positioned at the stairwell's base, bat clutched tight, I was paralyzed by fear as the sobbing crescendoed. A sudden crash reverberated from within the room, the impact of something substantial. More crying followed. I surged upstairs, seizing the doorknob, still locked. "Cease this!" I roared, pounding the wood. "Leave her be!" The weeping instantly vanished. Utter silence descended. Then, footsteps, unmistakably clear, traversing the guest room floor towards the door. Measured, ponderous footfalls. Retreating, my heart hammered against my ribs. The steps halted directly on the other side. I could discern breathing, faint yet undeniably present. Someone or something stood inches away, separated only by the thin barrier of wood. Flight. Down the stairs, out the front door, into the cold refuge of my car. I drove until I reached a nondescript motel, remaining absent for 2 days. Upon my eventual return, the guest room presented its usual placid facade. No evidence of the violent crash I'd witnessed orally. The door swung open freely. I meticulously inspected every carton, shifted each piece of furniture, scrutinized every inch of plaster and floorboard. Nothing amiss, except for one chilling novelty. Etched into the door's inner surface, roughly at eye level, were 3 jagged gouges marring the varnish, stark against the aged wood, scratches that had not been there before. I sought solace in ritual. Father Gabriel arrived, blessed the house, dispersed holy water through each room, professing no sense of overt malevolence but promising prayers. The voices persisted. I consulted the esoteric. Madame Evangeline, armed with crystals and smoldering sage, traversed the house for hours before declaring the presence of multiple energies, none inherently wicked. The voices persisted. I turned to science. Dr. Aris Thorne prescribed medication for anxiety, proposing the possibility of stress-induced auditory hallucinations. The voices persisted. Winter yielded to the tentative green of spring. The voices became spectral cohabitants, their nocturnal dramas an unwelcome rhythm in the house's lonely heart, sometimes argumentative, occasionally laced with laughter, often imbued with sorrow, always after midnight, always sequestered behind the paradoxically locked door. A strange acclimatization occurred. The initial shock subsided. I began meticulously logging their appearances, straining to capture fragments of dialogue. Patterns emerged. Activity concentrated between 1 Vang and 4 a.m., predominantly on weeknights. The woman's name seemed to be Clara, or something akin. One man possessed a recurring slight cough. They remained oblivious to my shouts, my presence negated. The door, locked during their spectral tenure, was invariably unlocked upon their cessation. Then arrived the night that fractured everything. April 15th, the date seared into memory by the preceding ordeal of tax preparation. The voices commenced around 2:30 a.m., but transformed. A cacophony erupted, all 3 participants shouting. The sharp percussion of shattering objects punctuated their fury. The woman screamed, a raw plea, "No! Please, don't!" Bat in hand, I charged the stairs, prepared to demolish the door if necessary. Her screams intensified. A man's enraged voice cut through. "You invited this upon yourself." More breakage. I slammed the bat against the door. Wood splintered but held firm. Again and again, I struck. The tumult within seemed to swell, feeding on my violent efforts. A final, desperate blow, and the door burst inward. Emptiness greeted me. Stark, absolute vacancy. No figures, no debris, nothing disturbed. But the cold, it was glacial. My breath plumed visibly in the air. The window remained shut and latched. Then my gaze fell upon the hardwood floor. Liquid. A small puddle, originating near the room's center, was spreading. As I watched, mesmerized, it expanded. The fluid was dark, viscous. Tentatively, I touched its edge. Blood. I recoiled, stumbling backward. The pool continued its impossible growth, now vast. The temperature plummeted further. My own breath hung like frozen mist. The blood reached the threshold where I stood, trembling. And then I heard it, a whisper, intimate as a breath against my ear, carrying the woman's voice, crystalline and desperate for the first time. "Save us." Again, I fled, spent the remainder of the night huddled in my car within the fluorescent sanctuary of a retail parking lot. Returning the following day, the blood had vanished without a trace. It had never been. That was 3 days past. Since then, silence. The voices are absent. The door remains compliant. The room maintains its vacant stillness. Yet the atmosphere has shifted. The air feels dense, charged with anticipation, as if the voices linger, unheard, merely waiting, watching. Yesterday yielded another discovery. Burrowing into the town's digital necropolis, the old newspaper archives, I hunted for any mention of the house's past. An article from 1985 surfaced. A woman named Clara Vance had vanished following a dispute with her husband, Arthur, and his brother, Silas, within their residence. My residence. Her body was never recovered. The men asserted she had absconded. Police investigated, but proof remained elusive. Accompanying the text was a photograph of the house, identical save for one detail. The guest room window was shattered. The caption noted its damage occurred during what Arthur Vance termed Clara's abrupt departure. I commit this account to record now because I know their return is inevitable. They must return. Clara's narrative is incomplete. The men's part is unfinished. The events of 1985, sealed within that room, remain unresolved. And I suspect I understand why I was chosen as their audience. Yesterday, while finally sorting through more of Eleanor's lingering possessions, I unearthed an unfamiliar family photo album. Idly flipping through its pages, I stopped at a photograph of Eleanor's grandmother as a young woman. Her name was Clara Vance. They are back. Even as I transcribe these words, their voices drift down from upstairs, clearer now than ever before. They are calling my name. The door is locked again. But tonight, the dynamic shifts. Tonight I ascend those stairs. Tonight the dialogue changes. Tonight the tool is heavier, the intent absolute. I carry a sledgehammer. What awaits me remains unknown. But Clara deserves resolution. Eleanor's grandmother deserves tranquility, and I demand answers. If this record is found, and I am absent, you will know the location. The guest room, behind the locked door that has no key. Just listen for the voices. Sanctity, I'd always believed, was synonymous with serenity. Old churches were meant to soothe, reservoirs of quiet contemplation, yet the instant my foot crossed the threshold of that particular confession booth, a cold knot formed low in my belly. A sound slipped from within, an exhalation, ragged and slow, the ghost of a breath. I recoiled, my gaze fixed on the narrow aperture. Above, the chandelier cast a tarnished, golden spill across the booth's age-worn timber. It stood derelict, unused for generations, or so Silas, the caretaker, had assured me. Still, the conviction settled, heavy and unwelcome. I was not alone in that cramped, hollow space. Twice weekly, Tuesdays and Thursdays, I dedicate my hours to this century-old edifice. My domain lies within the dusty embrace of the archives, tucked away near a rear corridor. Here, amidst cabinets breathing the scent of decay, reside the church's paper memories, brittle letters, forgotten council minutes, sacramental ledgers. Handling these fragile testaments requires a delicate touch, as I sort them chronologically, meticulously logging each discovery. The church staff grant me solitude, a courtesy I appreciate. The feeling of eyes peering over my shoulder frays my nerves. Besides, the basement office maintains a cool, steady equilibrium, a refuge from the seasonal whims that might otherwise splinter my focus. This evening, however, time had slipped its leash. Engrossed, I'd lingered past my usual departure. An elderly congregant's murmur about potentially misplaced files, supposedly secreted in a storage nook adjacent to the confessionals, had snagged my curiosity. I resolved to investigate. The main nave lay hushed, my tread echoing unnervingly against the vaulted ceiling. Overhead lamps sputtered, casting the long corridor in a restless, uneven light. Silas had mentioned locking up at 9, but his patience was a known quantity. He never hurried me. I felt no pressure to rush. In the chapel's leftward gloom stood the old confessional, a relic defined by its small wooden door and a curtain bleached pale by time. I recall navigating a loose floor tile near its entrance, a minor hazard Silas had once pointed out. He'd also mentioned the priest who last occupied this booth, long since surrendered to dust and memory. His passing prompted the installation of a newer confessional, positioned closer to the altar on the opposing side. This elder twin remained, shunned, slowly succumbing to whispers of structural decay and a peculiar, lingering odor I'd never personally detected until tonight. Drawing near, my hand outstretched towards the handle, I heard it again. Not a sigh this time, but a whimper, soft and stifled, as if someone pressed sorrow into their palms. I froze. Leaning closer, I pressed my ear to the wood, the frantic thudding in my chest, a counterpoint to the chapel's silence. Darkness pooled behind the worn curtain. No flicker of movement betrayed a presence. "Hello?" I whispered, the sound swallowed by the stillness. Silence answered. Another faint exhalation brushed the air, or perhaps it was merely the echo of my own strained nerves. Swallowing hard against the rising tide of apprehension, I eased the door open. Inside, twin wooden benches faced each other, bisected by a thin partition inset with a tarnished metal grille, the screen through which penitent and priest once exchanged hushed words. The air hung thick with the scent of mold and ancient varnish. My fingertips, tracing the bench's surface, came away gray with dust. Empty, utterly empty. I scanned the tight corners. Concealment was impossible. A flush of foolishness warmed my cheeks. Still, the unease lingered, a chill that refused to dissipate. Then my eye caught it, a folded slip of paper wedged behind the metal mesh. Gently, carefully, I worked it free, the fragile edges tearing slightly. The paper felt brittle, almost skeletal. Unfolding it revealed cursive script in faded ink, the loops and swirls difficult to decipher fully. Phrases surfaced from the faded lines. "I carry this weight, and I cannot speak of it aloud." A profound disquiet settled over me. A date, decades old, clung to a corner. The anonymous author wrote of feeling ensnared by the church's silence, yet offered no clue as to the nature of that silence. I refolded the paper, resolving to show it to Silas before departing. As I turned, a minute sound pricked the quiet, the soft compression of knees shifting on a kneeler perhaps, but a glance confirmed the emptiness on the other side of the partition. A sudden, desperate need for open air seized me. My chest felt constricted. Latching the booth door as securely as its old mechanism allowed, I hurried towards the grand entrance. Silas stood waiting by the massive doors, his silhouette framed against the deepening twilight. "Everything all right, Ilara?" he inquired, his tone mild. I managed a nod, unwilling to voice the strangeness, reluctant to appear spooked by shadows and whispers in an abandoned box. That night, the confessional infiltrated my dreams. The metal grille loomed, and faint, muffled sobbing emanated from the darkness beyond. I woke near 3, drenched in sweat, heart hammering against my ribs, throat parched. After a glass of water, I tried rationalizing, dismissing it as overwrought imagination. Yet a persistent whisper urged me back, an insistent curiosity, a need for answers, perhaps even more fragments of that hidden story, took root. It clung to me through the morning hours, an unwelcome shadow. The following afternoon found me at the church earlier than scheduled. A brief greeting to the receptionist, then a direct path towards the old booth. An immediate wrongness registered. The door stood slightly ajar. I distinctly remembered pulling it shut. Silas might have checked, I reasoned, attempting to quell the nervous flutter in my stomach. Nevertheless, unease prickled my skin as I approached. The corridor held a damp, stony musk. Ancient pews groaned under the accidental brush of my arm. Stepping inside the confessional again, I saw it. The dust on the penitent's bench was disturbed, marked by the clear impression of a palm print. Gooseflesh tightened on my arms. My breath hitched. Words failed me. My mouth suddenly arid. I stood utterly still, listening intently. Again that faint noise from behind the grill. A soft, tremulous exhale, the sound of speech struggling against an invisible dam. Leaning forward, ear pressed near the metal perforations, my pulse pounded a frantic rhythm in my ears. "Is someone there?" I asked, my voice barely audible. Silence reigned. Then my gaze fell upon another folded paper, tucked beneath the bench's edge. I retrieved it. The script matched the first. This missive spoke of guilt, of the church's complicity in concealment, of its refusal to acknowledge fault. The writer yearned for absolution, unattainable without revealing the full truth, a truth they seemed unable to voice. The note ceased abruptly, unfinished, unsigned. Leaving the booth, a tremor ran through my hands. I shut the creaking door and sought out Silas, presenting the new discovery. He maintained he hadn't touched the booth in years, insisting no one else would have reason to enter. He regarded me with open curiosity. "You're certain about this, Alara?" I showed him the paper. He shrugged, a gesture of weary resignation. He'd mention it to the priest, see if anything was known about old confessions left behind. I withheld the detail of the recurring sounds, the print in the dust. The fear of sounding unhinged was too potent. Over the ensuing week, the confessional exerted a morbid pull. Each time my path led me past it, the fine hairs on my nape prickled. One evening, resolved to confront the mystery, I arranged to stay late, alone. Silas locked the main doors, entrusting me with the key for my departure. He asked no questions. Sepulchral quiet reigned in the chapel. Armed with my phone's flashlight beam cutting through the gloom, I traced the perimeter of the pews, senses straining for any anomaly. Finally reaching the booth, I detected the faint, ghostly aroma of cold incense. The door was shut tight. My pulse quickened. With deliberate care, I opened it, slipped inside, and pulled it closed behind me, immersing myself in the close darkness. Letting my vision adapt, I sat on the penitent's bench. The wood groaned beneath me. My palms grew damp. I stared at the impenetrable grill, half expecting a face to coalesce from the shadows. Nothing but deeper blackness resided there. Yet I heard it, a faint rustle like stiff fabric dragged across stone. "I don't know who you are," I began, aiming for calm, "but I'm here to listen." My heart hammered. A fleeting impression of a whisper, thin as cobweb, brushed my ear. I leaned closer, every muscle taut, a glacial chill tracing my spine. I tried to speak again, but my throat seized. Then another exhale, barely perceptible, questioning my own perception. "I'm here," I repeated, my voice strained. "I can help." My breathing grew shallow, tight in my chest. Moments stretched into an eternity. Then, something slid beneath the partition from the other side. Another sheet of yellowed paper, folded neatly. My hand trembled as I picked it up, illuminating it with my phone. The text spoke of betrayal, conspiracies, a plea for forgiveness. The church, it claimed, had buried evidence of profound wrongdoing, impacting many lives. The words vibrated with rage and regret, the writer blaming themselves for their complicity of silence. It concluded with a familiar refrain: "I seek absolution, but no one will grant it." A deep cold permeated my hands. Clutching the paper, my mind raced. "I don't know what happened," I said aloud, my voice cracking. "I'm not a priest. I can't absolve anything." A silence descended, heavy and absolute. I pushed myself upright, bracing a hand against the booth's confining wall, my knees weak. Pushing the door open, I stumbled out, heart pounding violently enough to ache. I swept my gaze across the empty, dimly lit chapel. Taking a ragged breath, I forced my legs to move, locking the booth securely behind me. For days now, I've focused on the archives, burying myself in sorting documents. Yet the notes and the impalpable presence remain vivid. Sleep offers little respite. Dreams replay the grill, a muffled voice murmuring my name, jolting me awake in a cold sweat. My appetite has vanished. Colleagues remark on my pallor. I murmur excuses. Eventually, the gnawing curiosity became unbearable. I gathered the collected notes, spreading them across a table in the basement office. The handwriting, across all fragments, was undeniably the same. Piecing together the scattered dates suggested a timeline spanning from 50 to perhaps 30 years ago. Recurring phrases, hidden truth, the church refuses to acknowledge, I cannot say more, painted a picture of an attempted confession, a revelation of institutional cover-up perpetually thwarted. The urge to present these to a current priest warred with profound hesitation. Was it my place? Yet, hadn't this presence singled me out? Silas continued his gentle dismissals. Old buildings groan, wood settles, wind finds ingress. Rational explanations easily accepted, were it not for the tangible papers, appearing as if by unseen hands. One late afternoon, the church emptying, the distant strains of choir practice fading down a hall, I felt the pull again. I returned to the old booth, leaving the door slightly ajar against the feeling of entrapment. I settled onto the bench, flashlight resting on my lap. The wood felt colder than ever. I consciously steadied my breathing. Minutes crawled by. Then the soft shuffle, closer this time. My muscles locked, jaw clenched. "I'm listening," I whispered, the words tremulous. "I have the papers. I've seen what you wrote." I inclined my head towards the grill, its darkness absolute. My phone buzzed in my pocket, making me jump. I ignored it. The rustling intensified. A distinct sense of movement emanated from the other side, though no form resolved in the penumbra. My heart raced, sweat beading on my temples, fingertips tingling. A quiet exhale drifted through the mesh. It sounded fraught, desperate, the breath of someone drowning in unspoken words. "You need to tell me what happened," I urged, my own pulse roaring in my ears, my stomach twisting. I braced myself for a voice, a real voice, but none came. Instead, a final piece of paper slid into view on my side, thicker, densely filled. "I cannot face judgment from those who remain silent about their own guilt," it read. "I came to speak the truth, but the church ignored me. They told me to stay quiet." I read it twice, the paper rattling in my violently shaking hands. My breath came in shallow gasps. I could almost picture the writer hunched on the other side, head bowed, wrestling with ghosts. Looking through the grill yielded nothing. Footsteps echoed in the hallway. A choir member passing. Darkness had fallen outside. A wave of nausea washed over me. Stuffing the note into my pocket, I stood abruptly. "I can't help you," I said softly, definitively. "I don't know what to do." I waited, listening for any response. Only silence answered. I backed out of the booth, pulled the door shut, and fled. My limbs felt leaden, my head swam. Fumbling with the keys at the side entrance, I burst out into the cool evening air, gasping. The breeze chilled the sweat on my brow. I stood there, heart pounding, grappling with the experience. Someone, something, sought absolution from me. A volunteer, for sins the institution itself had allegedly buried. 2 days have passed. I haven't gone near the booth. Avoidance feels like the only recourse, yet the notes haunt my thoughts, whispering of secrets and unabsolved guilt weighing upon their author. Spirit, delusion, or something else entirely. I cannot dismiss the size, the papers materializing from nowhere. A residue of pain, perhaps, trapped within the wood and shadows. Proof eludes me, but the memory of that muffled, struggling presence is indelible. Something remains, waiting to confess, seeking release for a sin never acknowledged. Should I delve deeper or sever this strange connection? I hover in the balance, caught in the cross-currents of this ancient building's hidden history. My hands tremble at the thought, and my gaze inevitably drifts towards the confessional doors whenever I pass. Something in that sepulchral space is calling, and I fear I lack the strength to keep listening, yet doubt I possess the will to entirely turn away. Escape, I'd thought, from the city's ceaseless clamor, its myriad distractions. Instead, I found myself marooned in this diminutive solitary cabin, listening nightly to concussive impacts against its timber walls. Each time my eyelids descend, phantoms orbit the perimeter in my mind's eye. I'd braced for rustic, for Spartan simplicity. Nothing prepared me for the hours after 11. This place, rented for a handful of weeks, was meant to be a sanctuary for thought, a quiet crucible in which to forge the detailed reports my profession demanded. The office thrummed with disruptive energy. My apartment felt like a shrinking cell. I craved an unbroken expanse of concentration. An online listing materialized, a cheap, unassuming cottage, nestled 2 kilometers off the arterial road. Photographs depicted a modest wooden shell, a sliver of porch, rooms barely sketched. No neighbors, no thoroughfare, no tourist snares. I secured it with scant deliberation. The proprietor, a disembodied voice on the line, seemed amiable enough, outlining the cabin's monastic lack of internet or television, compensated by the modern sacraments of electricity and plumbing. Sufficient, I deemed it. Arrival was on a Monday afternoon, beneath a sky scrubbed clean, the sun draping warmth across my shoulders. The track leading inward, a rutted artery choked with potholes and stones, demanded a crawl. Vast, dormant fields flanked me, bleeding into a backdrop of undulating woods and hills. Tranquility seemed etched into the landscape. Emerging from my car before the cabin, I drew a deep draught of air thick with loam and chlorophyll. The proprietor was absent. but the key rested in a small metal box affixed to the door frame, awaiting my arrival. Its turn in the lock granted entry. The interior exhaled austerity. A compact kitchen harbored a gas stove. A narrow living space offered an aged sofa and a plain wooden table. The bedroom barely contained its bed and nightstand. A short corridor terminated at the bathroom. Rough-hewn planks formed the walls, punctuated by a few windows filmed with dust. I tested the switches. Light bloomed. Taps yielded water. The toilet flushed. Primitive yet adequate. My suitcase claimed the bed as I paced, absorbing the cabin's character. That first afternoon elapsed in quiet industry. Laptop, notebooks, pens colonized the table. Hours dissolved into the rhythm of typing, drafting reports, while the only counterpoint came from sporadic birdsong and the faint sibilance of leaves stirred by a passing breeze. Near dusk, I conjured a simple meal on the stove, consuming it amidst a silence that initially felt like a balm. Sleep claimed me around 10 that evening, weariness from the journey overriding the stiff mattress and coarse linen. Sometime later, a sound jolted me awake, a solitary, distinct rap against the exterior wall, unnervingly close to my head. I lifted my head, straining into the darkness. Silence resettled. Just the house groaning, I reasoned. Timber settling. Perhaps a thermal sigh. I burrowed back into the pillow, chasing elusive sleep. The following day unfolded without incident. Reports progressed. A brief walk surveyed the property. Lunch was taken under the indifferent sun. But the second night reintroduced the disturbance. A knock, then two more near 11:15. Soft, yet sharply defined, like knuckles against the outer boards. I sat bolt upright, my heart hammering a frantic rhythm against my ribs. I waited, breath held, but the rapping ceased. Rising, I armed myself with a flashlight and crept to the front door. Easing it open, I swept the beam across the immediate vicinity. Nothing stirred. No wind rustled the nearby foliage. No trees stood close enough to brush the walls. No animal sign presented itself. The grass lay undisturbed. My own respiration sounded unnaturally loud in the stillness. I secured the door and retreated to bed, sleep proving shallow and fitful. Over the ensuing nights, the knocking intensified, adhering religiously to its post-11 schedule. On the fourth night, closer to midnight, it manifested as a sequence of taps migrating along the wall. Not the random scrabbling of claws, but something measured, deliberate, hinting at a cryptic cadence. My pulse leaped with each onset. Raccoon, fox. I repeated the litany of rational explanations, yet discovered no corroborating tracks, no scat. Rain arrived on the fifth night, beginning around 10. Wind rose with it. By 11, a deluge hammered the roof. I worked late, hoping the storm's roar would provide sonic camouflage. But at 11:30, a distinct, rhythmic banging commenced on the far side of the living area wall. Subdued, yet steady, a percussion keeping time with the downpour. I shot to my feet, flashlight clutched in a trembling hand. Forcing myself outdoors into the lashing rain, my jacket soaked through instantly, denim clinging cold to my legs. I traced the cabin's flank, beam slicing through the torrent, illuminating only wet wood assaulted by raindrops. Circling to the rear, cautious on the slick, muddy grass, I found the tapping had ceased. I stood shivering, teeth chattering, listening to the rain's monotonous roar. Nothing else. Defeated, I returned inside, trailing water across the floorboards, my pulse a frantic drum against my ribs. After toweling off and changing, I courted relaxation, but sleep remained elusive until nearly 2. Morning light revealed a sodden landscape, rain-flattened grass, everything saturated. I scoured the ground again. No impressions, human or animal, no trails. The emptiness felt accusatory. A daytime tension began to coil within me, the simple knowledge of approaching nightfall, a source of low-grade dread. That 11 o'clock threshold loomed. Music from my phone was a futile gesture against the weak signal. No television, no radio. I felt utterly excised from the world, a captive audience to my own mounting anxiety. By the 7th night, the thought of premature departure had taken root, warring with unfinished work and prepaid rent. I resolved to endure. Perhaps imagination was amplifying mundane sounds. That evening, pasta consumed while staring blankly at my laptop screen. A soft rustling outside around 10:30 might have been wind, or might not. My stomach clenched, shoulders remained rigid. I compulsively checked the time. Minutes past 11, the knocking resumed. Flashlight instantly in hand, I stepped onto the porch, pulse thrumming, ignoring the tremor in my fingers. The night was still, the moon a veiled presence behind clouds. I circumnavigated the cabin slowly, beam interrogating every plank. No marks. The sound seemed to emanate from the opposite side. Moving there, it fell silent. I waited, listening. Only my own breathing, ragged and loud. The source remained maddeningly elusive, seeming to come from everywhere and nowhere. Back inside, door bolted, I stared at the walls, feeling simultaneously foolish and petrified. A tightening vise around my chest constricted my breath, scattering focus. Calm down, I admonished myself, but my thoughts raced. A prank? By whom? Miles separated this place from any other dwelling. The main road was too distant for casual mischief. The proprietor resided in another town entirely. It strained credulity to imagine him undertaking nocturnal journeys for the sole purpose of rapping on walls. The subsequent days adhered to the established pattern. Daylight hours offered a fragile truce. Birdsong, sunlight painting the grass, clouds drifting benignly. I filled these hours with typing, pacing, wrestling with the possibility of my own unraveling sanity. Then, inevitably, after 11, the siege would recommence, sometimes brief flurries of taps, other times sustained for minutes. There were nights the sound localized near windows, a delicate fingertip percussion on glass. Other nights it returned to the wooden walls, executing short migratory bursts around the structure. One night I resolved to wait in darkness, positioned near the back window, flashlight resting beside me. Near midnight the tapping began, unmistakably at the cabin's rear. A low, resonant thump, thump, thump. My heart leaped, my skin grew clammy. Stilling my breath, resisting the urge to illuminate the scene, I rose stealthily and crept toward the window. Pressing my face close to the cool glass, revealed only impenetrable blackness. Then, silence. I flicked on the flashlight, its beam spearing the night. No movement, no discernible shape, nothing but the indifferent sheen of wet grass. Morning found me depleted, neck knotted with tension, a dull ache throbbing behind my eyes. The thought of summoning someone, A friend, flickered but faded against the impracticality and the sheer embarrassment of articulation. Explaining seemed impossible. Contacting the proprietor felt equally futile. What could I report? Nocturnal knocks by an invisible agent? His skepticism felt like a foregone conclusion. The following evening brought more rain. Its steady drumming created a dense sonic curtain, making subtle sounds harder to discern. Yet, true to form, around 11:30, it returned, that insistent rapping, somehow amplified by the aqueous percussion. Flashlight retrieved, raincoat donned, I plunged outside once more. Slippery grass and clinging mud hampered my progress. My own heartbeats thudded in my ears. I rounded the cabin to the back, homing in on the repetitive knocks. Reaching the source area, the sound persisted, yet the beam revealed nothing. A knot twisted in my gut. The fine hairs on my arms prickled. "Hello?" I called out, my voice thin and shaky against the rain's roar. "Who's there?" No answer. The knocking ceased instantly, abruptly. I advanced a few more steps, light sweeping the drenched ground. Vacancy. My hands, I noticed, were trembling violently. My jacket felt heavy with absorbed rain. Shoulders ached. After a full minute of strained listening, I retreated inside. The moment the lock clicked shut behind me, the knocking erupted again, this time from the front of the cabin. The flashlight nearly slipped from my grasp. I scrambled to the front door, wrenching it open. Nothing. Cold night air washed over my skin. The porch stood empty. The rain fell without pause. A wave of desperate near-panic surged. I slammed the door, heading straight for the bathroom. Leaning over the sink, I splashed cold water onto my face. My reflection offered a grim portrait. Hollowed eyes, underscored by dark smudges, the pallor of sustained anxiety. The remainder of that rain-lashed night was spent huddled in bed, staring at the ceiling, besieged by intermittent knocks that felt almost taunting. Sleep was fragmented, fleeting. In the days that followed, productivity dwindled to nearly nothing. I developed a habit of scrutinizing walls and windows for any sign of forced entry, any physical clue. Nothing. Each morning involved a more meticulous survey of the perimeter, searching for footprints, broken twigs, disturbed earth. The animal hypothesis felt increasingly flimsy against the sheer neatness of it all. No burrows, no fur, no definitive tracks. My nerves frayed thin. Every innocuous creak of the cabin during the day became a jolt. Waking was now synonymous with the dread of encroaching nightfall. Approaching the 2-week mark, resolve crumbled. I was ready to flee. Reports be damned. I remember sitting at the table, laptop open to half-finished documents, my stomach twisted with anticipatory fear. The prospect of another night, another investigation into the dark, felt unbearable. On my final night, the sky hung low with cloud, the air thick, pregnant with unshed rain. Departure was set for first light. Post-dinner, I attempted distraction with notes, but my focus inevitably drifted toward the impending 11 o'clock hour. By 10 past, I was braced. The knocks began subtly, then gained confidence, becoming louder, more deliberate. I sat in the living area, lights extinguished, allowing my vision to adapt to the gloom. The sound commenced its slow circuit of the exterior wall. My breath hitched, sweat slicked my palms. My heart pounded a heavy, painful rhythm. It rounded the back, traversed the far side, lingered near the bedroom window. No discernible logic to its path, only its deliberate slowness, the calculated spacing between impacts. My fists clenched impotently. There was nothing to fight, nothing to confront. I remained seated, a statue carved from tension, until, sometime around 1 a.m, it finally fell silent. Sleep was a shallow, troubled state. At the first hint of dawn, I loaded the car. Suitcase, laptop bag, the physical remnants of my stay. Shoulders screamed from accumulated stress. Eyes felt gritty with fatigue. I locked the cabin, slid the key back into its metal niche, and ignited the engine. Driving away down the rutted track, a glance in the rearview mirror captured the wooden structure, still and mute in the pale morning light. No movement disturbed its facade. No sound broke the quiet. Relief washed over me, potent and clean. What caused those nightly percussions remains an unanswered question. A sliver of me regrets leaving the mystery unsolved. The larger part could not endure another night suspended in that specific terror. Remembering the cottage now evokes the profound stillness of the fields, the distant whisper of rain, and that insistent, rhythmic knocking against unseen walls. If pressed to explain the depth of my fear, I can only offer this. It happened in absolute silence, in profound isolation, with nothing visible to account for it. There's an intimate violation in hearing a knock in the dead of night when you know with certainty you are alone. It felt undeniably real, and that reality was terrifying enough. It was a resonance that chilled deeper than the rain. That feral resonance, a sound torn from some pre-human throat, echoing from the quarantine wing, marked the precise moment my employment at Blackwood Sanctuary became untenable. What awaited me within that chamber, steeped in shadows and antiseptic tang, would forever warp the fabric of my reality, blurring the already faint demarcation between humanity and the abyss. Elias, they called me. For half a year, I'd been a nocturnal custodian of cages and quiet sorrows at Blackwood. The rhythm was predictable, distributing kibble, sluicing concrete floors, occasionally murmuring solace to a shivering stray. A manageable existence, or so I'd convinced myself, until that particular Tuesday midnight bled into Wednesday morning. Stillness reigned, thick and almost viscous, punctuated only by the sporadic yelp or spectral meow drifting down the corridors. I was tracing my familiar circuit, the cone of my flashlight slicing through the gloom, when the sound began, a peculiar scraping emanating from the direction of the isolation unit. Quarantine, the repository for the unwell, the unpredictable, the potentially dangerous. Usually vacant after dark, its silence was inviolable. Any disturbance from that quarter instantly prickled the hairs on my neck. A raccoon, perhaps, I offered myself, a flimsy shield against rising dread. Just a scavenger finding a way in. Yet the sound possessed a disquieting cadence, a deliberate insistence, less animal panic than focused intent. Scritch, pause, scritch, scritch. Something beckoning, against the frantic counsel of every nerve ending, curiosity, that relentless human flaw, propelled me toward the heavy steel door dividing the main shelter from its quarantined heart. Closer now, the scraping intensified, acquiring a desperate edge. Then, beneath it, another sound surfaced, freezing the marrow in my bones. A low, guttural growl, profoundly alien, unlike any creature catalogued in my experience. My hand trembled as it closed over the cold metal handle. Primal warning screamed retreat, urged me to radio for assistance, pleaded for any action other than breaching that threshold. But the pull was inexorable. The door groaned open, the noise amplified monstrously in the waiting hush. Quarantine lay submerged in the weak, arterial glow of emergency lighting. The air hung heavy, a miasma of disinfectant layered over something else, something feral, ancient, and deeply wrong. "Is anyone?" My voice, a frail thread swallowed by the oppressive silence. No answer, only the relentless scraping, now pinpointed to a large enclosure at the room's far end. I swept the flashlight beam across the rows of empty cages. Then the light found it. My breath hitched, a figure huddled within, back turned, not animal, not entirely. Too large, the silhouette subtly distorted, defying anatomical sense. As the light pinned it, the figure froze. Then, with agonizing slowness, it began to turn. What confronted me then is seared onto the backs of my eyelids. The entity, calling it human feels like a betrayal of the term, possessed a man's general architecture, but the similarity fractured there. Its flesh was obscured by a thin, diseased-looking coat of matted fur. Its extremities terminated not in hands, but in wickedly long claws, their passage evidenced by deep gouges scarring the concrete floor. And the face, dear God, the face, a horrifying confluence of human structure and lupine features, a pronounced muzzle, sharply pointed ears, and eyes like chips of raw amber, blazing yellow in my flashlight's glare. I recoiled, a strangled cry lodging itself in my throat. The creature surged against the bars of its prison, claws screeching on metal, the entire structure shuddering under the ferocity of its movement. "What? What are you?" The question escaped, nonsensical, expecting no reply. Shockingly, it offered one, a voice like stones grinding together, words mangled, struggling for articulation. Help! Me? Denial surged, a waking nightmare surely. Such things belong to folklore, to the flickering terrors of cinema screens. Yet the caged horror pulsed with undeniable reality. Even as I stared, paralyzed by a morbid fascination, its form seemed unstable, rippling, shifting subtly. One instant, a flicker of tormented humanity. The next, a deeper descent into the bestial. It existed in some agonizing limbo between states. "How?" My voice quaked. "How did you end up here?" Those eyes, disturbingly intelligent and swimming with pain, locked onto mine. "Experiment. Defect. Please. Release." Compelled by a dark magnetism, I took an involuntary step forward. What experiment? Who did this? Before any further utterance could form, a raw howl of pure agony ripped from its throat. Its body convulsed, a sickening percussion of bone cracking and resetting beneath the skin. I watched, transfixed in horror, as the transformation accelerated, the lupine aspect asserting dominance with each violent tremor. The cage door rattled, metal groaning, visibly buckling under a strength that was anything but human. It wouldn't hold. Panic detonated within me. I spun, fled, slamming the heavy quarantine door shut behind me. Its reverberation was instantly swallowed by the creature's escalating howls, echoing madly through the sanctuary's corridors. I scrambled towards the main office, hands shaking so violently I fumbled with the telephone receiver. Who does one summon for such an anomaly? The police? Animal control? Neither seemed remotely equipped for the entity straining against its confinement. Then, as I stood clutching the receiver in a slick palm, the sound came. The definitive shriek of tortured metal giving way, followed immediately by the heavy, rhythmic thump-thump of unnatural footfalls on the concrete floor. It was free. The phone clattered from my grasp. My eyes darted wildly, seeking a weapon, any meager defense. They landed on the tranquilizer pistol kept for emergencies. I snatched it, fumbling a cluster of darts into my pocket, and wedged myself behind the flimsy particle board desk. The footfalls drew nearer, accompanied by that low, menacing growl vibrating through the floorboards. I held my breath, the tranquilizer gun leveled tremulously at the office doorway. It appeared, its hulking silhouette consuming the frame. In the office's starker fluorescent light, the monstrosity was fully revealed, a bipedal horror draped in coarse, matted fur, a terrifying fusion of man and wolf. Those luminous yellow eyes found me instantly, alight with predatory hunger. "Please," I whispered, the sound barely audible. "Don't! You asked for help. Let me help you." For a fleeting, heart-stopping second, something shifted in its gaze. A glimmer of recognition, perhaps? It hesitated, head cocked, as if processing the words through layers of primal instinct. The moment fractured. With a guttural snarl that vibrated in my teeth, it lunged. My finger spasmed on the trigger. Once, twice, a third time. The feathered darts struck true, embedding themselves in the creature's thick chest. It roared, a bellow of pain and fury, staggering but not falling. I scrambled backward, shoving the desk between us. A clawed hand swiped through the air where my face had been moments before, the wind of its passage cold against my skin. I choked on its hot, fetid breath, felt the sheer animal heat radiating from its form. Just as I braced for the inevitable, for the rending claws, the tranquilizers finally asserted their chemical authority. The creature swayed, its powerful limbs growing sluggish. Its movements became uncoordinated. With a final, long, mournful howl that seemed to contain ages of sorrow, it crumpled to the floor. Silence rushed back in, broken only by the frantic thunder of my own heart. I stared at the unconscious form, sprawled amidst the overturned office debris. In repose, a strange semblance of peace softened its distorted features. Time stretched, suspended, my mind reeling, struggling to stitch together the impossible events. Then, the distant, rising wail of sirens penetrated my daze. Someone nearby must have heard the cacophony. A choice presented itself, stark and immediate. Await the authorities, attempt an explanation that sounded like lunacy, and the creature? What fate awaited it? Dissection? Experimentation? A life sentence in some hidden government facility? Looking down at the pitiful, broken thing on the floor, a decision formed, one that would irrevocably alter the course of my life. I couldn't condemn it, not after its plea. Summoning strength from adrenaline-fueled depths, I managed to half-drag, half-carry the heavy, inert form to my battered sedan. I drove through the waning darkness, away from the town, towards the dense concealing woods miles beyond the outskirts. As the first tentative fingers of dawn painted the horizon gray, I steered onto a deserted logging track. The creature stirred in the passenger seat. I cut the engine, opened its door, and retreated, watching as it slowly regained consciousness. For a charged instant, our eyes met again. Was it gratitude I saw there, or merely the last vestige of the man entombed within the beast? Then, without a sound, it rose and loped away, vanishing into the deep timber, offering no backward glance. I tendered my resignation that same morning, citing an inability to cope with the strains of the night shift. It wasn't entirely untrue. Some nights, when the moon hangs full and pregnant in the sky, I find myself driving out towards those woods, and sometimes, carried on the still air, I hear it, a distant howl. It carries not menace, but a profound loneliness, the cry of a being caught irrevocably between two worlds. Whether I acted justly that night, whether I liberated a victim or unleashed a monster, remains an open wound in my conscience. I know only this: the world hums with far stranger and more terrifying frequencies than our mundane senses perceive. And somewhere in the shadowed heart of the forest, a creature that defies existence now runs free, because of me. The memory clings, sharp as shattered glass, the day the looking glass arrived. I stood adrift in my own living room, contemplating the ungainly bulk swaddled in bubble wrap, a nameless offering left upon my threshold. No sender, no point of origin, just there. With hesitant fingers, I peeled away the layers of paper and plastic, revealing a tall, tenebrous mirror. Its frame, a contorted nightmare of ebon wood, writhed with carvings, skulls and ciphers so intricate they seemed slick, like freshly rendered ink. A shiver traced its way down my spine, immediate and unwelcome, yet curiosity warred with revulsion. My fingertips brushed the uppermost skull. Its texture was abrasive, unnervingly akin to true bone. I forced down the unease, deciding with a shrug that it would hang in my bedroom. Mine is a life etched in routine. Days spent amidst the clatter and dust of a warehouse, evenings surrendered to the flickering television screen, perhaps punctuated by the hiss of a beer can opening. Haunted relics and arcane collectibles hold no allure for me. Still, a mirror is just a mirror, isn't it? A piece of free decor. I found a vacant stretch of wall opposite my bed, drove in a few nails, secured a heavy-duty hook. The act itself felt wrong, the mirror possessing a leaden weight that defied its dimensions, as if resisting installation. Once mounted, I stepped back. The glass was flawless, the reflection sharp. My own face regarded me, impassive. I shrugged again, pushing the disquiet aside, and turned towards the familiar rhythm of my evening. Later, toothbrush in hand, I cast a final glance towards the mirror before seeking sleep. My reflection mimicked me faithfully, normal. I extinguished the lights, burrowed beneath the sheets. A persistent hum of anxiety thrummed beneath my thoughts, a low-frequency dread I attributed to the frame's morbid artistry. I squeezed my eyes shut, willing oblivion. Around midnight, biology called. I shuffled back towards my bedroom, senses dulled by sleep, and passing the mirror, perceived a flicker of wrongness, a trick of the shadows, surely, but something felt discordant. I fumbled for the small lamp on my nightstand, bathing the room in a weak glow. My reflection stood there, yes, but its presence felt asynchronous, a subtle lag, a fractional delay. When I inclined my head, its mirrored movement trailed by a noticeable beat. I blinked hard. Instantly, it snapped into perfect synchrony. Exhaustion, I told myself firmly. Just exhaustion. I retreated to bed, actively suppressing the image. Morning light brought scrutiny. Dressing, I deliberately faced the glass, needing to dispel the nocturnal illusion. I raised a hand. My reflection mirrored the gesture flawlessly. I stepped nearer. It advanced in perfect concert. A sigh escaped me, carrying away a measure of the night's unease. Imagination, nothing more. I left for the warehouse. For several days, the mirror maintained its passive facade. It hung there, an ornate scar on my wall, its disturbing frame the only outward sign of peculiarity. Occasionally, my gaze would snag on it, particularly in the crepuscular hours when the carved skulls seemed to writhe in the low light. Tricks of the eye, I insisted. Mental static. I tried to ignore its presence. One evening, immersed in the droning inanity of a late-night talk show, a craving for a snack propelled me towards the kitchen. My bedroom door stood ajar, offering an oblique view of the mirror within. As I passed through the hallway, my peripheral vision caught it. I froze. My reflection was there, starkly visible, but utterly divorced from my own actions. I was leaning inward from the hall, peering into the room. The figure in the glass, however, stood erect, facing outward, its gaze fixed directly upon me. Utterly still, rooted in the center of its reflected world, it simply stared. A cold fist clenched in my gut. My throat went dry. Compelled by a morbid need for verification, I forced myself a step closer. The reflection advanced symmetrically, but its stare remained unwavering, cold, and appraising. Adrenaline surged, a frantic drumbeat against my ribs. I tried to form words, but my throat seized. Slowly, deliberately, I lifted a hand to wipe sweat from my brow. In the mirror, the gesture was duplicated, but with an unnerving slowness, a calculated deliberation. Its eyes never broke contact. A strange, invisible current seemed to tug me towards the glass. Flight screamed in my veins, yet a deeper compulsion held me fast. The need to know if my sanity was fraying. My legs moved, stiff and reluctant, carrying me into the bedroom proper. The reflection tracked my entrance. The instant I stood directly before it, the spell broke. Reality reasserted itself. My own face stared back, slick with fear, undeniably mine, moving in perfect time. I swallowed, the sound loud in the sudden stillness. My hands trembled. Sleep that night was a shallow, restless affair, haunted by the memory of those eyes. Were they angry? Accusatory? Every time I closed my lids, the cold stare materialized behind them. I tried my phone, scrolling endlessly, seeking distraction, but focus eluded me. Eventually, I left the television murmuring in the living room, a flimsy shield against the silence, until dawn. In the ensuing days, I cultivated avoidance. I dressed in the cramped confines of the bathroom, stole only fleeting glances at my hair before bolting for the door. But the knowledge festered. Something was profoundly wrong with the mirror. It felt sentient, watchful. Often, while in the bedroom, A distinct pressure would build at the base of my skull, the unmistakable sensation of being observed. A quick turn would reveal nothing but the twisted frame, my reflection placidly normal. Yet the feeling of ease never returned. One night I made the cardinal error of looking directly into it just before turning in. My reflection seemed to lean forward, closer to the glass than I stood in reality. Gooseflesh prickled my arms. I recoiled instinctively, but the mirrored figure held its advanced position. I could discern the curve of its shoulders, poised as if to push through the very surface. Then, in the space of a blink, it snapped back, perfectly aligned with my stance once more. A ragged breath escaped my tight chest. I killed the light, scrambled under the covers, my heart hammering a frantic rhythm against my ribs, for what felt like an hour before exhaustion finally claimed me. Another time I entered my bedroom to find the mirror reflecting not my familiar space, but something else entirely. A tenebrous chamber, its walls slick with perpetual dampness. The illumination was feeble, spectral, suggesting a distant torch or candle, though no flame was visible. Only a faint, erratic pulse of light cast on grotesque, dancing shadows. The walls possessed a rough-hewn texture, like cyclopean stone blocks in some forgotten vault. A profound chill permeated the air. I pinched my arm, hard, a desperate check against dreaming. I took a hesitant step towards the mirror, my feet feeling like lead weights. My pulse roared in my ears. As I drew closer, a faint, subterranean echo seemed to reach me. The rhythmic plink of dripping water, the whisper of a footfall shuffling down unseen corridors. Though the air in my room was still, a cold sweat beaded on my skin. Just as I came within arm's reach of the glass, the scene vanished. With the abruptness of a drawn curtain, my bedroom snapped back into view. I staggered backward, gasping, and sank onto the edge of my bed, struggling to regulate my breathing. After that, I threw myself into the mundane, arriving early at the warehouse, staying late, huddling in the living room with all the lights blazing. But the bedroom and the mirror remained unavoidable. Sometimes, glancing in, I saw myself. Other times, fleetingly, I saw that place, that sepulchral, dripping darkness. It never lingered, but each glimpse sent my heart into overdrive. Those damp stone walls, I could almost feel their chill seeping through the glass, a coldness that settled deep in my bones. A growing dread warned me against prolonged observation, a visceral certainty that if I stared too long into that crypt, something might eventually stare back. I considered calling Leo. He's no occultist, just a friend who knows about oddities, pawn shops, the detritus of forgotten lives. I tried explaining about the mirror, the frame, the occurrences. My voice remained mostly level, but the phone felt slippery in my shaking hand. He listened, baffled, offered no explanation beyond the common sense advice. If it bothered me, get rid of it. Sound advice. I'd thought of it constantly, hauling it to the curb, taking a hammer to its mocking surface. Yet, whenever I marshaled the resolve, a profound nausea would grip me, a physical resistance, as if the mirror itself exerted a will, anchoring itself to my wall, to my life. It sounds melodramatic, I know, but the sensation was undeniable. My limbs would grow heavy, my breath shorten, my heart pound with suffocating intensity. Action became impossible. So, I procrastinated. One evening, desperation spurred a different tactic. concealment. I unearthed an old, threadbare blanket from the closet. Standing before the mirror, palms slick with sweat, my gaze snagged on the leering skulls and serpentine twists of the frame. Taking a deep breath, I flung the blanket over its top edge. For a blessed instant, relief washed over me. The oppressive presence was masked. Then, a soft, deliberate scraping sound reached my ears, like a fingernail being drawn slowly across wood. I recoiled, startled. The blanket slithered down the glass, pooling at my feet. I looked up. My reflection's eyes met mine, locked in an unblinking stare. And was that a flicker of a smirk, a silent mockery of my feeble attempt? My stomach churned. I left the mirror uncovered. The scraping sound had unnerved me more than the sight of it. I didn't try again. Later that same night, I woke abruptly, drenched in sweat. My gaze instinctively flew to the mirror. My reflection stood there, impassive, except for its mouth, which was curled into a faint, unsettling smile. I wasn't smiling. My own lips were pressed into a thin, grim line. Yet, in the glass, that subtle curve remained. My heart hammered against my ribs, the sound echoing in my ears. I flicked on the bedside lamp, hoping the sudden illumination might shatter the illusion. Instantly, the reflection's expression smoothed into neutrality. A wave of dizziness washed over me, but I remained perfectly still, pinned by a primal fear, unwilling to approach. I lay there, watching that other me, until my eyelids grew heavy and sleep, troubled as it was, returned. The following days bled into a tense continuum. I felt like an inmate in my own apartment. The bedroom became hostile territory, avoided whenever possible, yet sleep demanded my presence. Each night brought subtle shifts in the reflection. Sometimes its eyes held a sharper glint of anger, or its head tilted at an unnatural angle. Fleeting glimpses of the dark crypt flickered at the edges, as if the background were unstable, bleeding through even as my own image remained. No voices, never voices, but sometimes those faint, distant echoes resurfaced, water dripping onto stone, a sound both desolate and expectant. Nightmares plagued me, not of monsters, but mundane horrors, standing frozen before the mirror, unable to look away, unable to move. I'd wake tangled in damp sheets, heart pounding, and steal a glance at the glass. The reflection would appear normal, or near enough that doubt could still find purchase. My existence became a grinding cycle of fear and self-recrimination. I searched online, typing vague descriptions, but without a name, a shop, a provenance, it was hopeless. Just me and this accursed object. The thought of passing it on, of inflicting this subtle torment on another soul, filled me with a paralyzing guilt. Sometimes I'd stand outside my own front door, keys clutched tight, gathering the courage simply to enter. My home, yet no longer a sanctuary. One evening, returning from work utterly drained, a reckless exhaustion settled over me. I didn't care anymore. I needed a confrontation. I strode directly into the bedroom, planted myself before the mirror, and stared. My breath came fast. I could see the rapid rise and fall of my chest, mirrored perfectly. "Enough," I rasped, the word shaky but audible. My reflection's lips remained still. Its eyes, however, narrowed fractionally. The cold fist tightened in my gut again. "Enough," I repeated, louder this time, forcing conviction into my voice. Silence from the glass figure. But then, a sound. Quiet, distinct. Tap, tap, tap. like knuckles rapping gently on the inside of the mirror. I jerked back as if struck, stumbling over my own feet. The reflection's hands hadn't moved, I was sure of it, yet the tapping persisted for several seconds before abruptly ceasing. I spun around, fled the room, and slammed the door shut behind me. I paced the narrow confines of the hallway, tension coiling in my muscles, hands clenched into useless fists. My mind raced, seeking an anchor. Water. I needed water. I drank a full glass in desperate gulps, forced myself to breathe slowly, evenly. This wasn't madness. The mirror was real, its phenomena undeniable. But what now? A hammer? The memory of that visceral resistance, that suffocating fear, stopped the thought cold. Sell it? To whom? How could I explain without sounding insane? Or worse, knowingly passing on a curse? Answers eluded me. Now, every night unveils new variations in the glass. Sometimes my reflection moves in real time, but with infinitesimal delays that set my teeth on edge. Sometimes it remains utterly still while I shift my weight or scratch an arm, a static image mocking my living presence. And sometimes the crypt returns, that suffocating darkness, the elusive flicker of light, the incessant, maddening drip. My heart accelerates whenever I glimpse those weeping stone walls. Their coldness feels tangible, radiating through the glass, settling into my marrow. I fight the impression that if I stare too long, too deeply into that gloom, something will finally emerge from it. A heavy knot of dread resides permanently in my stomach, a constant warning. Don't look too closely, but avoidance is becoming impossible. I'm writing this down, trying to impose order on the chaos, needing to articulate the fear that consumes me. I haven't told many. Who would believe me? They'd see hallucination, stress, delusion, but it's not. I'm just an ordinary man tethered to an object that defies explanation. I feel its gaze constantly. At night, lying in the dark, I imagine the reflection detaching itself, climbing silently from the frame, or worse, reaching out to pull me in. That's the deepest terror, the thought of crossing over, of stepping into that dank, echoing crypt. I don't know what resides there, but I feel its proximity, a crushing weight on my chest, a silent insistence that something waits on the other side. How much longer can this continue? I dread the day I look into the mirror and my bedroom is gone, replaced permanently by the crypt, or the day my reflection stares back with that faint, chilling grin fixed upon its face, refusing to mimic, refusing to release my gaze. I've tried everything short of outright destruction, but the mere thought triggers that paralyzing panic. My legs turn into water, my hands refusing to touch that malevolent frame. For now I am trapped. Each morning I wake wondering what new horror the reflection will unveil. Each night I lie rigid, listening for the tapping against the glass. That is my reality now. The mirror remains, it watches, it waits, and I cannot shake the insidious certainty that if I stare too long, one day I will see something irrevocable, something that will shatter the last vestiges of my sanity. So I try not to look, but sometimes, drawn by a morbid fascination, a perverse attraction to the source of my terror, I fail. Maybe one day I'll find the strength to shatter it. Maybe not. But tonight it hangs there on my bedroom wall, a dark portal, daring me to look again. A fist of thunder hammered the cabin, shaking me from sleep's shallow grip. lightning split the dark, a momentary, stark negative of the room, etching the rough-hewn walls onto my retinas. Out here, swallowed by the peaks, company was the last thing I courted, especially under the lash of such a tempest in the ungodly hours. Yet the frantic drumming on my door persisted, a desperate pulse against the storm's roar. Opening it felt like cracking the seal on a fate I hadn't chosen, a plunge into a vortex where sanctuary and survival blurred. I'd sought refuge in this skeletal structure, perched high against the world's clamor, chasing a silence the city couldn't offer. The irony howled with the wind now, mocking my retreat. A week ensconced, and nature decided to unleash its full, violent theater. The rapping intensified, a staccato counterpoint to the rain's relentless assault on the roof. "Please," a voice frayed by the gale, thin and reedy. "Anyone? I need shelter." Prudence screamed warnings. Spectral tales spun in flickering firelight about lone cabins and night callers. But humanity, or perhaps a profound folly, nudged me forward. A steadying breath, the click of the old bolt sliding back. She stood framed in the doorway, a wraith sculpted by rain, trembling uncontrollably as if the very air vibrated with cold. Raven hair clung like seaweed to her pale face. Her eyes were vast pools of primal fear, reflecting the lightning's glare. "God," she exhaled, breath misting in the sudden stillness of the doorway. I feared. Empty. "Inside," I urged, stepping back as she stumbled past the threshold, trailing the storm's chill and the scent of wet earth. The door boomed shut, muffling the element's fury to a dull roar. Closer now, her youth was stark beneath the grime, mid-20s perhaps, though hardship had etched premature lines around her eyes. Her clothes were torn, smeared with mud, and a raw crimson line scored one cheek, angry against her pallor. "Thank you," she whispered, arms clamped around herself, as if holding fragmented pieces together. This place, so remote, hope was draining. I fetched a thick wool throw from the back of the sofa, draping it over her shuddering form. "What happened? How did you come to be lost in this deluge?" She clutched the wool, a drowning sailor gripping flotsam, her gaze flicking nervously, mapping the small space for unseen threats. "It's convoluted," she murmured, teeth chattering slightly. "Hard to know where the thread begins." "A name, perhaps?" I offered, aiming for a calm anchorage in the chaos. A pause, a flicker of hesitation in those wide eyes. Then, Ilara. "Leo," I returned. "You're safe for now, Ilara. Sit. Tea might help steady you. Then if you wish, you can talk." She subsided onto the worn sofa, a fragile heap against the sturdy cushions. While the kettle hissed its small defiance against the storm's ongoing tantrum, my attention kept snagging on her. Each distant thunderclap provoked a flinch, a tightening of her grip on the blanket. The steaming mug I eventually offered became a totem, her chilled fingers wrapped tight around its warmth. "Bless you," she murmured into the rising steam, not quite meeting my eyes. Settling into the armchair opposite, I granted her space, letting the silence stretch, punctuated only by the wind's mournful cry around the eaves. "So, Ilara," I prompted gently after a while, "what errand brings you to the wilderness edge, on a night seemingly bent on destruction. She took a tentative sip of tea, wincing slightly. "Flight," she admitted finally, her voice thin as spider silk. "Running." "From?" Her eyes found mine then, and the undiluted terror mirrored there was visceral, chilling me deeper than the cabin's persistent drafts. From someone intending harm, someone capable, dangerous. A cold knot formed in my gut. This was deeper water than I'd anticipated. "Are you in trouble? Should we involve the authorities?" Her head snapped up, negation swift and violent. "No, please, no constables. They wouldn't understand. They might even be compromised, involved with him." Alarm bells chimed, dissonant and insistent. This felt like quicksand, pulling me into something murky and perilous. Yet the storm still raged, a tangible barrier against expulsion. "Who pursues you, Ilara?" I asked, keeping my voice low. She set down her mug on the rough side table, her hands betraying her with a visible tremor. "My former lover," she said, the words strained. "He wasn't the man I believed him to be. Involved in darkness, illicit dealings, things outside the law. When I confronted him about it, he..." Her fingers drifted unconsciously, ghosting over the raw scratch on her cheek. A flash of protective anger, unwelcome but potent, surged in me. "He struck you?" A slow nod, tears finally breaching her control, welling and spilling silently down her mud-streaked face. "I managed to get away, but he's been chasing me. Days I've been running, trying to disappear. I thought I'd finally given him the slip, but then I saw his car on the access road leading up here. Panic took me. I just ran into the trees. That's when the sky broke open." My thoughts spun, scenarios flickering like the lightning outside. If her tale held true, this cabin wasn't sanctuary, but potentially a shared trap. "Does he know you're here? Could he have seen you approach?" "I don't know," she said, her voice trembling anew. "Unlikely, I hope. But he has a knack, an awful knack for finding me." I rose, moving to the window, peering uselessly into the rain-lashed blackness. Visibility remained near zero, a void waiting to be filled by whatever hunted in the night. "We should be secure here tonight," I declared, injecting a confidence I didn't feel into my tone. "This weather grounds everyone. Morning brings clarity, options." Relief washed over her features, smoothing some of the tension. "Thank you, Leo. Truly. I don't know what I would have done if you hadn't." Her voice trailed off. I offered a thin, reassuring smile. "Try to get some rest. You can take the bedroom. I'll keep vigil out here, just in case." She looked as though she might protest, but profound exhaustion won out, visible in the slump of her shoulders. I showed her to the Spartan back room, found some dry, if ill-fitting clothes of mine, then resigned myself to the armchair and the long watch ahead. Sleep remained elusive. Every groan of the cabin's old timber, each gust rattling the window panes, set my nerves humming on a high, thin wire. Ilara's narrative replayed in my mind, fraying at the edges under scrutiny. Sympathy warred with a colder, more cautious logic. Inconsistencies, small but persistent, began to gnaw. The scratch on her cheek seemed too cleanly scabbed, less raw than a wound sustained in a frantic flight just hours ago. Her boots, though damp, lacked the deep, caked mire one would surely accumulate crashing through sodden woods in panicked desperation. Dawn seeped greyly through the windows as the storm finally retreated, leaving behind a bruised, dripping quiet. I heard movement from the bedroom. Ilara emerged, looking oddly composed, more put together than someone who had supposedly spent days fleeing for her life. "Morning," she offered, a tentative smile playing on her lips. "Any sign? Anything?" I shook my head, studying her face. "All stillness. The storm's broken. We should be able to head into town soon. Find you some proper help." A shadow. Was it panic, or something else, something calculating, flickered across her face before vanishing. "I don't think that's a good idea," she said quickly. "Too risky. He might be watching the roads." "Ilara," I began, my voice level, deliberate, the suspicions coalescing into certainty. "I think it's time for the unvarnished truth. Who are you really running from?" She held my gaze, a long, assessing moment passing between us. The mask of vulnerability dissolved like mist in sunlight, replaced by something colder, sharper, more shrewdly appraising. "You're more perceptive than you appear," she stated, her voice losing its tremor entirely, replaced by a cool, almost amused resonance. "Most men leap at the chance to play the rescuer, questions unasked." A sudden, sharp awareness of our profound isolation prickled my skin. The quiet cabin felt suddenly menacing. "What is the real story here, Ilara?" She sighed, running a hand through her now partially dry hair, a gesture not of weariness but perhaps of shedding a roll. "The truth? No one's chasing me in the way I described. Not exactly. I'm safeguarding something valuable, and I needed a quiet place, off the beaten path, until the immediate danger passed." My mind struggled to reorient, grappling with the shift. "So everything you told me last night, it was all fabrication?" "Not entirely," she conceded, with a dismissive shrug. "My ex-boyfriend is looking for me, certainly, but believe me, Leo, he's hardly the predator in this particular scenario." Then, cutting through the strained silence, the distinct growl of an engine, powerful and purposeful, approaching fast up the muddy track. Ilara's head snapped towards the sound, a predatory alertness transforming her stance. A slow, knowing smile curved her lips. "Ah," she said softly, "that'll be my transport." She moved towards the door with fluid grace. "Thank you for the shelter, Leo. Quite the lifesaver, in your own way." Before comprehension fully dawned, before I could formulate a response or a question, she was out, a swift dart across the damp porch, towards a dark, imposing SUV that had materialized from the trees at the edge of the clearing. She slipped inside without a backward glance. The door slammed with heavy finality, and the vehicle surged away, churning mud as it vanished back down the track, leaving only tire ruts and silence. I stood alone on the threshold, the clean, rain-washed air suddenly feeling heavy with deceit. Sunlight, finally piercing the retreating clouds, illuminated the quiet scene of my profound misjudgment. I had opened my door to the storm, and the stranger it carried offered solace born of instinct, and hovered perilously close to an abyss far deeper and darker than any mere weather pattern. What Ilara guarded, or who truly sought her, remained unsettling mysteries suspended in the mountain air, but the night left its indelible mark, a chilling, visceral lesson that in the vast, indifferent wilderness, the most dangerous shadows are often cast by human forms, cloaked in vulnerability, bearing plausible pleas for help. The forest floor, brittle with fallen foliage, went silent beneath my boots. I'd halted mid-stride, breath catching, a glacial chill seizing my veins. There, stamped into the damp earth of the hollow where my tent stood sentinel, were impressions not my own. Fresh, someone, something, had trespassed in my brief absence, and the woods, suddenly vast and watchful, held their breath with me. I was Elias, a devotee of the untrodden path, finding solace where maps thinned to rumor. The wilderness was my confessor, the solitude a potent draught. A rare week liberated from routine sent me deep into this sprawling, ancient woodland, further than familiar trails dared wander. 2 days dissolved in a haze of perfect autumn clarity, air sharp with pine resin and the musk of decay. My pace was eager, devouring miles. By the third sundown, civilization was a distant memory. I'd discovered an idyll, a small clearing cradled by pines, a brook murmuring nearby. Tent pitched, wood gathered, the promise of supper warming me, until I recalled my water purifier, left streamside. A trivial errand, a mere 5-minute detour. But returning, the sanctuary's peace shattered. An instinct, primal and cold, prickled my skin before my eyes confirmed the violation. Footprints, vast, heavy prints circling my small nylon haven, sunk deep where none had been moments before. I stood rooted at the clearing's edge, gaze flicking between the marks and the dense, encroaching timberline. The familiar woods twisted into something alien, shadows pooling like ink, pregnant with unseen watchers. Only the frantic drumbeat in my chest broke the profound quiet. Hesitantly, I advanced. The tent seemed untouched, a fragile dome against the wilderness, but my pack, always secured within, lay exposed just outside the fly sheet, its zipper gaping slightly. Trembling fingers pulled it wide. A hollow gasp escaped me. Provisions vanished. Every dense energy bar, every foil packet of sustenance, the very nuts and berries I'd meticulously combined, gone. Cold dread bloomed, sharp and suffocating. Days from any outpost, foodless, yet that fear paled beside the certainty the thief might linger. Rescue? My phone was a useless brick here. The emergency beacon felt premature. I wasn't injured, merely stalked by terror. As twilight bled into true dark, the choice solidified. Brave the black, pathless woods now, or endure the night besieged by the unknown. The forest's nocturnal menace seemed the greater peril. I would stay, but sleep was a banished luxury. I fed the fire compulsively, coaxing flames into a defiant circle against the oppressive, swallowing dark. Each twig snap was a gunshot, every rustle of unseen leaves a deliberate approach. My sheath knife felt pitifully inadequate, a child's charm against the looming presence my fear conjured. Imagination painted horrors, a bear with uncanny dexterity, a starving wanderer driven to theft, or other. Sleep must have claimed me, a brief, troubled surrender. I awoke violently, heart slamming against ribs. The fire dwindled to pulsing embers. Disorientation warred with raw fear. Then, the sound. Footfalls, measured, deliberate, tracing the perimeter of my small, dying light. Scrabbling upright, I fumbled for my torch, dropping it with palsied hands. The steps ceased. Hello? My voice, a thin reed in the vast silence. Is anyone there? A hush descended, absolute and unnatural. Even the night insects fell mute, the world holding its breath. Then, a voice, rough as granite scraping granite, breathed from the darkness just beyond the fire's reach. You tread where you are not welcome. I spun, scrambling to my feet, searching the impenetrable shadows. Who are you? What do you want? A low chuckle echoed, devoid of warmth, chilling me further. Want? Only your absence. This domain is mine. You intrude. Movement flickered at the edge of sight. A figure detached itself from the gloom, stepping into the dim, ruddy light. Impossibly tall, impossibly slender, it seemed stretched, distorted, a silhouette mocking human form. Arms, unnaturally long, dangled past its knees. A wide-brimmed hat cast its face in utter shadow, but twin points of light, reflecting the embers, gleamed where eyes should be. What are you? I breathed, the question a wisp of sound. It tilted its head, a jerky, unsettling motion. I am the woods warden, its sentinel. I dissuade trespassers like yourself. It glided closer. I stumbled backward, tripped on a gnarled root, crashing down hard. Crab walking away, I felt its presence loom. Please, I choked out. I'll go. Just let me gather my things. I'll leave now. It paused, considering. No. You leave now. As you are. Your possessions are forfeit. Payment. A protest died on my lips. The sheer wrongness of it, the way darkness clung to its form, screamed that defiance was folly. My legs, liquid with terror, barely held me. All right, okay, going. Which way out? A long skeletal finger, extending impossibly far, pointed into the blackness. That way. 2 miles straight. Do not deviate, do not look back, and never return. I nodded, mute, and plunged into the direction indicated. Every nerve shrieked, run, but a deeper instinct urged measured steps. Time fractured in the oppressive dark. How long I stumbled, I cannot say. I fell repeatedly, palms and knees scraped raw. But I obeyed. No pause, no backward glance. Just when exhaustion threatened to buckle me completely, I saw it. The faint, worn ribbon of the main trail. Relief washed over me, hot and stinging like tears. My feet hit the packed earth, and the fragile control shattered. I ran with burning lungs and swimming vision, ran until a shape emerged from the pre-dawn gloom. A trail marker, then the blessed sight of a graveled parking area. A solitary vehicle rested there, an old, battered pickup. From it emerged an elderly man, Silas, likely preparing for an early trek. He saw me, wild-eyed, smeared with dirt and blood, clad only in thin layers against the biting air, and his weathered face registered shock. Merciful heavens, son, what in blazes happened? My mouth worked, but coherence failed. How to frame the night's grotesque reality? What could he possibly believe? Finally, I managed a rasp. Lost. Walked all night. He nodded, a flicker of doubt in his assessing gaze. Right then. Best get you seen to. As the truck rumbled away, I risked a look back towards the tree line. Was it a trick of the light, or did I glimpse for a fleeting second a tall, thin silhouette observing our departure? I never returned to those woods. Solo hiking lost its allure. The wilderness now held a different kind of intoxication. Fear. Some nights, sleep offers no refuge, jolting me awake with that gravel voice echoing, "This domain is mine." What stalked me? A forgotten legend? A fever dream born of isolation? Or something ancient, nameless that defies our tidy explanations? All I know is this. Sometimes, when dusk settles over the familiar woods bordering my home, I see a flicker of movement among the distant trunks, something tall and unnaturally thin. And I remember, some wild places guard their secrets fiercely, possess teeth we've forgotten. I lock my doors tighter then, and try to erase the memory of the night I learned that not all paths are meant for human feet.